Hello, we're just going to give a few minutes for everybody to get logged in and get settled in. All righty. As we're waiting for everybody to join us today, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our welcomes. Thank you everybody for joining us for our first of our June speaker series today, June 12th. I'd like to welcome everyone to Tribal Voices Matter, the speaker series. And today's topic is the impacts of toxicity on first foods. And I am Angela Jackson, your host of the Salmon Orca Project speaker series. Before we proceed, let us take a moment to honor and acknowledge the ancestral homelands on which we all stand. We recognize and pay respect to the indigenous peoples and tribal nations who have been stewards of these lands for generations. The Salmon Orca Project firmly believes in the power of collaboration and unity through this webinar series. We aim to foster a platform where tribal leaders, community members, experts, and stakeholders from various backgrounds can come together, share experiences, and work toward innovative and equitable solutions. In recent years, concerns over water contamination have grown exponentially, particularly in regions where Indigenous communities rely heavily on local waterways and soils for sustenance and cultural practices. From industrial pollutants to agricultural runoff, these natural resources have become reservoirs of toxicity, threatening the very essence of traditional first foods. Salmon, the cornerstone of Indigenous diets and cultural heritage, are now at risk of contamination, carrying with them a silent but potent threat to community health. As these toxins accumulate in the fish and permeate the soils, they find their way onto dinner tables and into foraged foods, perpetuating a cycle of environmental degradation and public health crisis. The urgency of this situation cannot be overstated, as the health and well-being of entire communities hang in the balance. It is against this backdrop of environmental peril and its direct implications for human health that our discussion today takes on a profound significance, as we seek not only to understand the implications of toxicity on first foods, but also to chart a path towards resilience and revitalization for Indigenous communities. So today I bring with us our both of our guest speakers. They were featured in the award-winning film The Covenant of the Salmon People, which recently won an Emmy last month. I have with us Dr. Kim Hartwig, MD, who is Nez Perce. She is the Nimipu Health Medical Director and a board-certified family physician. She is committed to improving the overall health of Indian country through the preservation of our culture through knowledge, history, and understanding of what it means to be Nimipu, assisting in creating community-wide programs and increasing awareness of the needs of our communities through identifying and implementing changes to provide quality care in Indian country is fundamental tenet of her philosophy in medicine, which is why she returned home to practice medicine. Dr. Hartwig is the mother of 6 children who recognize that our work is for our future and our thanks go to our ancestors who prepared this way for us. I also have with us Mr. Nakia Williamson. And I will leave it up to you to pronounce how you say that. I have right here right in his introduction, how he says his Nez Perce name. But one who gathers the clouds, as he goes by in English, graduated from Lewis Clark State College, BS Social Science, gained much of his knowledge and education concerning the traditional way of life of the Nimipu from Nimipu culture bearers over a lifetime. He works in the area of cultural resource management for more than 27 years, currently serves as program manager for the Nez Perce Tribe Cultural Resource Program. He conducts and coordinates technical consultation with various federal and state agencies, such as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Bonneville Power Administration, 13 national forests, and the Bureau of Land Management, just to name a few. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All righty. So I have with us a few questions. I'm going to go ahead and ask. We'll go through these questions, and as the audience has questions to pose, if we have time at the end, we'll go ahead and take a look at those questions and see what we can answer. So the first question that I have here for us today is for you, Nakia. Could you elaborate on the traditional practices of foraging foods within the Nez Perce culture and the significance in maintaining cultural identity? Furthermore, how does environmental contamination, both in water and soil, pose challenges to the sustainability of these practices?
Well, again, thank you for that question and allowing us to be able to talk about this important subject. And I think it's really important to contextualize and understand a perspective that tribal people such as our tribe, the Nimipu, who's maintained this relationship with this landscape, with the water, with everything that had come before us, that set the scene for our creation and our existence. And for our people, that what we call our treaty reserved hunting fishing rights, or Article 3 treaty rights that were reserved in the 1855 treaty, are much bigger than that. And so those, what we now call treaty reserved rights, were the way in which our people lived and interacted with this landscape. And so it was more than a resource-based relationship, that these things that our people gathered were fundamental to our life, to our existence, to our culture, to our language, to our very identity. So there's really not an opportunity to change that without changing who we are. And as we've experienced historically, some of the impacts due to the historical impacts due to the shrinking and alienation of our people from the original places that our people occupied across the 19 million acres. Now, currently, our reservation 770,000 acres. And we do access some of these usual custom areas, but it has changed us. It has changed our way of knowing, and we see that shrinking of our landscape and lack of access to the land and to many of these things that were so important to us. We also seen what parallels that is the loss of our cultural identity, the loss of our language, which is an imperiled language. And all that is based on the land, and it's based on these interactions that our people have had that are part of how this earth and how this land works. We're a part of that. We're not separate that. And that's what differentiates us the new people who don't have that relationship that we do, and that relationship is fundamental to who we are. So these things are much larger than just our sustenance as people, what we use as a resources. They're very integral to who we are as a people, and in order for us to persist, we these things have to play a role in our life, as they always have. And so when toxins and things are introduced in the system, we don't have the ability just to turn away and take another route in life without changing what it means to be Nimipu. That's how fundamental this relationship is to us. And so I think that's really important to understand, because that relationship is very different from the outside people who view these things simply as resources to be managed and to be had.
Thank you for that response. Um, I also wanted to get a good definition on what we mean by when we talk about what first foods are. Can you let our audience know what we mean when we're talking about what first foods are?
So we have, adopted a lot of these terms. Some of them that are probably accurate, and modern tribal people as we are today, and most of us we're not speaking in our language, so we adopt certain terms that I think are, some of them are more accurate than others. But when we're referencing these things, we're talking about those original foods that are, like I mentioned, are go beyond simply the Article 3 treaty rights that are mentioned, the you know and those things that are a part of how we were created. And of course, in that story, upcoming to the creation of the Nimipu, there was an order that was placed to the land, and that order was based on all of these, which were our elders that came before us. These people, this Titwa Tityaya, the Natsoch, the Chinook salmon, the Hasu, the lamprey, uh, lamprey eel, the kakit, kaus, chiton, temis, timonit, all the roots and all the berries that played a role in how our people lived and how our people existed. And it was how our people not only gained sustenance, but these things are also placed in how we see ourselves in relationship to everything. In addition to, is there's, aside from the treaty reserved rights, there's certain responsibilities that were placed upon us, and those responsibilities connect us again to the land and made us accountable to the land. And in the springtime, and as we have done here and in other places, other reservations, in particular the treaty tribes, the 4 treaty tribes, we conduct a ceremony called the Ka'oyet. And that ceremony is part of our protocol, in how it opens up our time to gather. It acknowledges our creation, it acknowledges our life, and it makes us accountable. So before we had enrollment cards, before we had any of those things that are connected to our federally determined identity, we had responsibilities that were always there in place for tens of thousands of years. That Ka'oyet was one of our ceremonies that was a must for us before we gathered. Now we rely on showing a card or these bureaucratic processes, but that was part of our responsibility, not only to ourselves and to our own traditions, but to the land and to the resources that we're acknowledging them, we're acknowledging their life. And by acknowledging their life, we're also paying recognition to the life of our ancestors and our life now, and that's coming after us, the future that we're preparing for, which is the biggest thing. I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And so I'm going to pose the next question. Dr. Hartwig, given the cultural significance of foraged foods, How do you view the implications of environmental contamination on the overall health and well-being of Indigenous communities, particularly concerning chronic diseases and other health disparities?
Thank you, Angela. And I also want to express my gratitude for being able to share today on your program. I think that the things that Nakia touched on with respect to relationship that really can't be measured, certainly in science and in medicine, we like to measure your cholesterol and measure your blood pressure and measure your weight. And those are tangible things that help us to conduct an assessment about your health. But the relationship that Nakia speaks of that we need to have, and many of us don't have, with our land that make us who we are, really significantly impact negatively our overall health. One of the components that I've been exploring and gaining understanding in is really how that separation from our land has impacted who we are and the knowledge of, what does it mean to be Nimipu? Well, the activities that Nakia describes and the relationships that we had, certainly within each other, but also with the four-leggeds, with the all of the animals, the fish, the water, the land, so many of those relationships have been severed with the relocation, with the concern about our ancestors. Are we teaching too much so that harm may come from people speaking Nimi Putimpt? I can imagine that my great grandparents were torn within about what to teach and what not to teach because of fear of being too Nimipu. Is there going to be harm on my Qatat because she speaks her language? So they didn't speak it. She wasn't. They weren't allowed to teach it or felt reserved to pass those things on. Those are the things that we need to repair with respect to our relationship for health to be elevated. The relationship to our food and recognizing, a female salmon spawns one time in her life. She travels to and from, and when she's preparing her life for us to catch and gain nutrients from that, she's preparing her whole life for us. And I think that at times we don't recognize that because we can drive through and have, a meal in a matter of minutes when culturally our beings have prepared their entire lives to provide nutrients for us. And that relationship we often don't have or don't value, which we really need to get back to. In addition, the traditional practices to fish or to hunt or to gather required community closeness that we need to have within our communities, but also physical exertion. Standing on a hillside or on a riverside takes a lot of strength and balance and to be able to, pull in the fish or to dig the roots, there's a lot of manual labor there that was healthy for us that we aren't participating in anymore. And so that oneness that Nakia speaks about is extremely important and has negatively impacted our way of life and overall health because we don't have that connectedness. And that I believe clinically is what we need to do to try to heal some of those traumas that we've experienced and not being able to learn what we need to have learned to be Nimipu.
Thank you for that. And so I heard a little bit of contribution to some mental health and some physical health going on for the lack of having our way of life and being able to teach it generationally. And so the lack of being able to teach generationally has impacted our mental health, and then our community and well-being, and being able to go out into the steep slopes and the mountainous regions impacts the muscle memory of our bodies.
Absolutely. Just overall, when you don't have identity in who you are, that impacts almost every aspect of your health. Knowing who you are as a person who Creator made you to be, which we haven't been allowed to be often, and that understanding or appreciation or conviction in who we are is extremely important for overall well-being.
Thank you. So considering the intricate connections between the environmental factors, dietary habits, and health outcomes, how do you propose addressing this broader systematic issues contributing to water contamination and its impact on Indigenous community health?
I think that I'll go back to that creation of cultural identity in us relying on people like Nikia who have historical knowledge and teachings that we need to pass on for that identity, and that connectedness that we spoke of earlier. When we choose to be reconnected in the ways that our ancestors were, that had been here for generations, I think that our health outcomes, our dietary habits, that identity component is the most important factor in us addressing our health, because so many people have elevated blood pressure, for example. Well, in my mind, that or substance use, alcoholism, drug abuse, those are all symptoms. Those are solutions to the patient. Those are things that they are choosing to use to help their hurts or their life experiences that have been challenging for them. And this is how they escape from those. If we are able to utilize cultural identity and knowledge and teaching and language to help that person feel a place, because I think that's one of the components that at least in my family, they didn't, I don't imagine that they felt, is that they didn't have a place because, as I said, they were not able to learn all that generations prior had been able to learn because of the fear of what was appropriate to pass on or not. And when you don't have confidence in who you are, how can you care about what a blood sugar is, or what your blood pressure is, or that you have protein in your urine, or that you have some numbness or tingling in your toes? Those things don't really matter, because that deeper conviction of who you are or who Creator made you to be supersedes any of the measurements that we can use in medicine to help. So truly utilizing our culture and our identity to heal from within, I think is the most important approach that we need to take in addressing the health maladies that we experience today.
Yeah, that really touches my Tamina, my heart, those words that you just gave. Just thinking about the priorities, what our priorities are with our culture and our priorities with our health as an individual, and having to discern and make the choices with what is my priority isn't going over and checking my numbers and having the measurement. I want to go fishing today, like That's my identity. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to go fishing, and making that choice is difficult sometimes. As a cultural resource manager, Nikia, what collaborative efforts have you been involved in to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into environmental stewardship initiatives aimed at preserving water quality, and ensuring the sustainability of first foods?
Well, I think one of the things I've been trying to break down, not only within the Department of Natural Resource, not only within, I'd start with cultural resources as a very specific function that we have related to compliance related issues, National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106. Those are pretty clearly defined. Also, the work that happens within the Natural Resource Department, which each department, whether it's wildlife, land services, forestry, they have certain things that they are pretty clear that's within their area of interest that they take care of. Certain technical, kind of like what Dr. Hartwig is speaking of, certain specific measurable things that we've been able to that really operates of how we're connecting to things, how we're managing things, how we're thinking about things, but also within the tribe. And I think the challenge that I always feel is these things are not issues that are related simply to the cultural resource department. That in order for us to manage and to make decisions, and I think nowadays we understand all these measurable ways that Dr. Hartwig is talking about. But what our people understood is that what was fundamental to how we made decisions, what was fundamental to how we made decisions related to the land, to what we now call resources, was fundamental to our very life and existence as a people. They weren't sequestered in one department or one small program or one office. It was a responsibility for all of us to carry. And such as you hear the speaking of life in our way that our people followed was a very strict way. And the way we think about things is so very different now. And to hear Kim, Dr. Hartwig speak of these things, that's truly what a woman's responsibility was within our community, to remind us, our community, of our life, of our existence, because them as a vessels for life to sustain, that was a big part of who we are. And that's why certain things within our community were done in the manner that they were. That's why men took the responsibility of hunting and fishing, is because they had the ability to create and to sustain life. And so the men had to take upon the sometimes difficult responsibility of taking life so that our people could survive. That's why those things were separated, not because as when the new people came, they put certain values that this had more value than that. And those things didn't exist in our way of life. We recognized and respected the roles that women had, and the women respected the roles that men. And it was those things that came together that created for our life. And so I think these are issues that our tribe as a whole needs to be the basis for our decision making, that affects all these things that are important to us. And what our people knew and know, I think innately, like other indigenous people throughout the world, is that how we treat the land, how we treat the environment, is how we're going to treat one another. I don't think it's any coincidence that you see what's happening in the world, you see what's happening in our own country, that the way there's all this vitriol and all this hate that is being happening, at the same time you see what's happening to our land. That's what indigenous people are here to remind the people that have lost their connection and lost the law, the Tamaluit, that keeps us in balance with the land and therefore keeps us in balance with one another. And when we see those things happen in our communities, we know something's out of balance somewhere else, because the land what happens in natural resources affects what happens in Nimipu health, affects what happens in social services. Those are all connected. And as a tribe, we should innately know how those things work, even though we're divided as programs. We have this, somewhat, to use the term that's being utilized a lot, colonized way of operating. But we need to understand to break those things down and understand how these things are all connected, like Dr. Hartwig is talking about, and as our culture reminds us. And so, these are responsibilities that go beyond, like I said, one office or one program, and they're all of ours that we have to carry together as a community, and not as individuals.
As you were discussing all the interconnectedness, it brought to me the visualization of the medicine wheel. And when I thought of the medicine wheel, I've always thought of our animals and our environment, and just sort of limited what my view of the medicine wheel was. But as I have grown in my life and grown with my understanding of what I view from our tribe, I see so much more interconnectedness than I ever have before. And I think that it's very beautiful, and I'm glad that you mentioned what you mentioned, bringing those thoughts to my mind, getting a visual for how everything is woven together. Mr. Williamson, in light of the ongoing environmental challenges, how do you see the role of Indigenous knowledge and community-based approaches in informing policy decisions and driving actionable solutions to address water contamination and its effects on Indigenous community health?
Yeah, I think our role, and as we have kind of seen with a lot of reimagining of how federal agencies have been engaging with Indigenous tribal communities, such as our community here, through co-management, co-stewardship, I think there's an opportunity for us to really express these things, because our people know how this land works. There's a reason why our people have been here in excess of 16,500 years, and we've been through a lot of changes that have happened, cataclysmic changes that we've never seen in our lifetime or in the lifetime of this nation. When the great floods came that covered up the land, when the land, earth shook, and when the skies darkened, our people, part of our memory, part of our stories, remembers that time, remembers the time even before the stone came here, the basalt was placed here. And so that long memory, just like we rely on the animal people, that's why we go to them, because they were here before this, and we follow suit of how they had done things and set forth for us. We have to be the ones, as the elder community of those that came after us. And so it's up to us to be able to help guide these decision making processes, as tribes are being more fully engaged in these processes, in order for us to be able to sustain the life and culture of our communities, which is so interconnected, but also the life of all people that are here, all people that are now we now share this landscape with, and to be a reminder of how fundamental these things are to our life. And that's why in our ceremonies, why we start out with water. That's why they say kus, and we drink water. It's a reminder that that's a fundamental element to us. And that's all our ceremonies do, is they remind us of not our rights as defined in the federally determined identity that we've had since the treaty making time, but the responsibilities that we have. That's what even our own communities are forgetting, not what's owed to me or what my right is as an individual, but together what we are accountable for. And that's what our traditional way of life and our Tamalwit, our law, sets forth, is that accountability. And this is what we bring forth into all these decision makings that happens about land, water, salmon. All these issues are connected and fundamental to that understanding that we need to be able to bring and leverage to all decision making that's happening, that's affecting all people in all communities. And so, this is something that is happening, I think, but needs to continue to happen. But at the same time, we as Nez Perce people, as our community, need to be understand because there is a lot of confusion, a lot of mixing of different things. There's a reason why here we do things on this side of the mountains. There's this idea that all tribes are the same and we all complement one another. But that's why on this side of the mountains, we do things in a counterclockwise way, whereas you go into like the plains, they do things in a clockwise way because we're following the earth. That's what we take care of. Our people follow the rotation of the earth. In the land of the plains people, they're following the sun, and to those things that are brought together, that how we take care of the land. Each group of people were given certain responsibilities. That's why we do things the way we do. It's not in disrespect or not in contradiction of another tribe. That's the part we take care of, and collectively that's how we take care of the land. And that's why the way we conduct things have to be done the way that was given to us, just like our language. And so, these things are important that we need to bring, like I said, to these areas where decisions are being made in order for the life of all people on this land now.
Thank you so much for that discussion and talking about our responsibility. And so I turn over the last question that I have for this session. Dr. Hartwig, given your experience in medical practice, what proactive measures do you advocate for in building resilient healthcare systems that effectively address the health impacts of environmental contamination on Indigenous populations?
First, I'd like to say that I think that it should be our goal that we don't need resiliency. I think that we rely upon that and need it now, but my goal would be that we wouldn't need that in the future in the system or within our communities. Resiliency is a characteristic that we use for challenge. Not that we're not going to have challenges, but if we are allowed to be who we were created to be, we would have strength, we would have wisdom, utilization, but resiliency, in my mind, is a characteristic for more severe challenges or maladies, and my hope is that we don't have to have that in the future. I think that one of the biggest things, as Nakia is pointing out, is that in order for change to happen, we have to be aware. And the policymakers have the awareness now that we do have knowledge. And in the colonized societies or world, there's often a need for data or evidence for existence, or just evidence general. Is it strong enough? Is it not strong enough? What's the N? What's the p-value? All of those measurable factors are utilized in the non-native world. But as Nakia mentioned, us being here for over 16,500 years, are we not evidence enough for all that has happened to try to destroy us? In my mind, that's enough. And the systems that we have need to have a more holistic approach to them, not just looking at a single system, not just your blood pressure, because your blood pressure, just like our bodies, when your blood pressure is high, it affects your kidneys negatively because of the fine intricate network of filtering that the kidney, or the glomerulus, which is the functional unit of the kidney, that has to perform, that function that it fulfills filter out impurities. There isn't one system in our body that works independently. And if any one of our systems collapses, we don't survive. And so that collaborative approach that we really need to have to take care of a person, of our community, of our families, holistically, really is a approach that I believe is paramount for improving health generally. In that awareness of change, I'm hearing, outside entities are recognizing that, but we need to recognize that within, because we have what we need to heal within us. Creator gave us that. We have to pull down, heal from the defenses that we have put up for survival to be able to heal ourselves from within. And then, as I mentioned, society's greater dependence on us to lead, because we are here after all of this time, and utilize our knowledge and our wisdom and rely on us as a whole, not just the medical director or the director of cultural resources, the tribe in general. Every one of us has contribution that we need to bring to help make those changes.
Thank you so much for those words. And so that concludes what I have for questions. We do have some questions coming in live from the audience. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn over and see how many we can get answered over here. Sometimes we do have questions that are outside of our peer review, so we'll go ahead and try to give it our best shot. So the first one we have coming from Stephanie Blair: can risk assessments in toxicology be used as a tool to revitalize Indigenous land relations, or do they cause more harm than good by continuing to separate Indigenous people from their lands through health advisories? Can we possibly use these tools to measure the positive health outcomes from revitalizing cultural practices and to diagnose the harm that non-Native people cause themselves by not recognizing natural law? Would you like to take a shot at that, Dr. Hartwig?
Yes, I'm not a biologist, but I'll see what I can say. I think that we certainly need to rely on technology as we have it, but need to be mindful of the natural laws you speak. And we don't speak of natural law, and Nakia, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The way of life that is followed many times, we may see glimpses of benefit in our time, but we don't make decisions for us. We make decisions for generations that are to come. And one of the other components that colonization likes to see is our results right now, and that isn't that timeline was not placed upon us. The land, as Nakia talked about, really determined when and where we were going to be, and I think that toxicology can be used as a tool, one for safety, because safety is extremely important. But I'm not sure that the positive health outcomes that one may be searching for with that quantified result or evaluation will ultimately lead to the healing that at least I would anticipate or expect.
Would you like to add on anything onto that, Nakia?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, the other side of talking about the life of and history of Nez Perce people is we have always sought out other types of knowledge, other types of way of knowing that could help enhance the world as it changed around us. And we've seen that historically, when they first seen writing and they learned about what we now call education, as they sent five young boys to Red River School up in Manitoba to learn to write, because they knew that that was going to be a tool that was going to be important to our longevity as they seen the world changing around them. They knew that that was power. And that's why subsequently, where Hinmatoya, young Joseph, gave his address at Carlisle, is that he encouraged the Nez Perce students that were there to learn and to educate, because he knew that that was going to be an important part of our life as we move forward. But like with everything else, our people, we hold on to the basis. Unlike the new people, like we see technology, uh, one comes in and it makes the other one outdated, and then we go to the next one and the other ones. That's not how we did things. When we brought something into our life, it was made in addition to what our value system. It didn't guide us. It was a tool for us, as education is a tool for us. It's not necessarily who we are, but our people have always brought in those other ways of knowing. And I think just the like kind of part of what we're speaking of too is kind of the subjugation of our type of knowledge, and even the way they speak of it. What we have is traditional knowledge, ecological knowledge. What they have is science. So even the way we speak of them is subjugating our type of knowledge to Western science, because that's the way that we as modern people understand things the best. Even though our people have always had a long history of sustainability, of how to operate according to our Tamawat, our law, which was a different way of knowing and understanding. But fundamentally, I think these are important tools that we need to utilize and be cognizant of, um, and use to the benefit of our community as they live today, because we have different factors that are affecting our community that our old people never did. So we need to have different tools to address these issues, but those things have to be consistent with our way of knowing and way of understanding in our value system that has kept us connected to this place.
Thank you. And so we move along here. I have several questions coming in now on the Q&A. I see a couple hands up. If you have a hand, go ahead and type your question in the Q&A and we will get to it if we have enough time at the end of our show. Our next question from Don Miller is, what's happening to monitor or address the algal blooms that started appearing behind the Lower Granite Dam? Would you like to try to respond to that, Mr. Williamson?
Yeah, I'm not involved in that specifically. I know Water Resources and Fisheries Watershed probably has more information on that. I know there's been work there, but I'm not specifically involved in that work. But that speaks to the larger issue and larger question regarding the Four Lower Snake River dams and those reservoirs that are warming up, and those things that had happened that create for these problems that we're having, within our system, that's affecting all aquatic life, and then even terrestrial life. And so those are the issues that are at hand that we're hoping to address. But these are big sort of issues. There's kind of the small day-to-day stuff that we can measure and look at and try to address, but ultimately we know what the ultimate causes for those things is the change of the hydrology and the breaking of our system, of how it works. And I always think about like Dr. Hartwig was speaking of making the analogy, and she did so very well. I don't have the biological or science background now. She was explaining the system of our body, of how it works, and she was talking about the different components of how they work together, and because that's how our elders would explain that our body, our physical body, our physiology, the the way the blood moves throughout our system is comparable to this land, and so that's what they would compare it to. They would compare the waters, the rivers, the tributaries, like our arteries and our veins that feed this land. And when you change those, when you alter those, it's gonna, just like in our body, you have somebody who has a heart attack, or you have somebody who has an issue, a stroke. It's because one of those things have been interrupted, and that's the same thing that's happening to the land that our people understand through the way of life. And with all the science, available science that we have, people can understand that. With all the measurables that they have and technology, they can't understand these fundamental, and it's up to us to remind them of how fundamental these things are. You don't need a lot of science to really understand that this system is broken, and we need to find ways to address these issues. Otherwise, it's going to continue to hamper the life of people and of our future.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of blood clots and kidney stones and gallstones and all that stuff that we have science for our bodies, but we have blockages in the flow of our water, and when we have a blockage to our heart, we don't live. We don't live. We have a question from Carl Wasili. I hope I said that right. Good afternoon. My general question, as a former environmental officer for Alaska Intertribal Council, working on technical aspects of NPDES in US and global contaminants of fallout in Arctic and international treaties, is there any development of policy in the EPA and the federal agencies to recognize the fish consumption values of salmon people in Alaska, and PNW is not the same as allowable permitting of pollution in the standard? Can you take a shot at that, Mr. Williamson?
Yeah, I know those things were recognized a few years, and I think we did that salmon consumption study, and I can't remember all the details of it, because we understood that our intake of salmon was different than your average American by a large percentage. And so, yeah, those had to be more form fitted to our community in terms of water quality and things of that nature. I'm kind of, delving a little bit out of, my area purview, but those are things that have happened and have occurred. And so I think it is a different sort of thing when you're describing the impacts to communities, tribal communities, and as we mentioned, all the things that I've kind of brought out and tried to express today in terms of our culture and identity that's connected to that. But those are the symptomatic things. When you see our culture and language diminish, that part of our identity is going to diminish. But also what that's also saying is something's happening within the land and within the environment, because all those things are connected and dependent on one another. And the thing that we also have to remember is that our way of life naturally recognizes and understands is that these things that we're speaking of, again, we're used to treating them as managed resources, but they have their own life and their own rights to this land, the same as we do. And it's only the subjugation that sometimes Western science and Western ways of knowing that subjugates these things underneath Religion subjugates these things under our lives and puts them less than, the same way that we were put less than other people that had come here. That's something we're not recognizing, that they have their own life, they have their own existence, and to not recognize their life is really really a horrible way that everything they do is in relationship to us. That is, as long as they're a resource for us to live, as long as there's salmon for us to eat, it's more than that. It's recognizing their life and it recognizes their life and their ability to exist the same way we exist, and also recognizing how all those things are connected. But that's the thing that's just so missing, that I think other people just somehow are missing. Us modern people are missing that sort of basic understanding of recognizing the life of everything that's out here there, and the land and those things that our people innately in our culture teaches us to understand.
And I would just add that there are immeasurables that can never be measured. The value that the Nitzo has for us isn't a number. There's not an assigned data point that can be created or extrapolated to explain its value. And also would comment that life, as Nakia mentioned, that, especially in medicine, we have this hierarchy, right? I'm a doctor, and then there's a nurse practitioner and a PA and a nurse, and this team of people that work together to take care of people. In the Western world, it's a hierarchy, and really it's, there are things that the nurse or the lab tech or the phlebotomist can do that I can't, and so recognizing that necessity that and function that everybody has to provide the quality care is not just me, is really important for us to remember. But I think that in nature, like in our creation story, we had to have the animals come forward which to support us, because we can't live without them. They lived without us for we don't know how long. But if we didn't exist, they would still exist. We're the ones that are harming them. And so that measure that Nakia has mentioned over and over about us needing to be attuned to what Mother Earth needs to support life and the sanctity of it, really it's us who needs to listen. And is there possibly a policy that creates that? I don't think so. We've tried to mandate or control behavior, and the Boston Tea Party showed us that we couldn't. And so I think that a policy gives parameters, but really we need to rely on the indigenous people, on the tribes in this country that are all over our country, to utilize wisdom and knowledge that we have from time immemorial.
That leads into, there's two questions over here from our audience that I wanted to pair together as we're coming to the end of our hour here. Talking about, I'm going to summarize both of them together in one here. Talking about the wisdom that is needed. Our audience would like to know where they can learn about our principles in a way that they can help support us and implement principles that decolonize the way that we go about thinking about the land and waters and even each other, and how they can implement some of those principles, or even where to learn about how to do that.
I guess I'll jump in. I think there's some literature out there that kind of helps open the doors to some of that knowledge, some things that are happening, some research that I think are helpful. But just like I tell a lot of our younger people, and uh, the flip side of all the education that a lot of our younger people have been able to attain, um, the flip side of that is sometimes that Western way of teaching and knowing is much different than our way of teaching and knowing and understanding these things. That and the reason why I say that is because some of these things that our people carry forward can't be taught in a 8 hour class. They can't be taught in a course, where after such and such hours you're considered, to have a master's degree in this or that. These are ways that have to be lived, and that's the difficulty of transmitting this knowledge to younger people is they want a class to learn how to do this when it's a life that you have to live in order to carry it. It's not something you can learn in a 2 hour class or a 2 year class. It's something that you have to live and continue to build on and to foster that knowledge. And as mentioned before, our way of knowing and understanding our Tamaluit, our law, and a way of understanding these things is not written in any book. And that's the reason why our elders were wary of writing things down. And some of our most sacred things are never written down, is because as soon as you write it down, you are limiting it to that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And also that can be taken away. But if you live it and it's a part of you, and it's something that is a part of your being, it can never be taken away. And that's the only reason why we have what we have left, is because our way of life was never written down. And so it couldn't be taken from us. They try to beat it out of us. They try to institutionalize it out of us, but still we were able to hang on to some of it because it was who we are. It was a part of us, and it couldn't be ripped out as hard as they tried to. And so I would just encourage that to really understand these things. You have to be around the people, you have to be connected, and you have to be engaged, and you have to live this life. I think there are a lot of good people that we've met, through the work that we've done with the film and things of that nature, that are understanding these things, I think, in their own way and in their own time. So stay engaged with people that have like minds, and continue to learn, and to take it a part of you, and to live it, and not it just be something that gets set on the shelf. And that's why our old people, when they would describe this, they describe it as a way of life. It has to be lived and experienced, and not just read about and talked about.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank you both for coming today. I have learned, I've learned a bit during this lunch hour, and I hope our audience has too. If you are not already following the Salmon Orca Project, we have our Salmon Orca Project website, Facebook, and our YouTube channel, where this live webinar can be viewed later. We also have another upcoming speaker series this June. We will be discussing with our youth how they approach conservation and stewardship. So join us during the lunch hour on June 26th. And again, I would like to thank everybody who came to see us live today, pose questions, and interact with us. And thank you so much, Dr. Hartwig and Nakia Williamson, for joining me today.
Let's see how, yeah.
Let's see how, yeah.
Yokolo.